I'd like to start with the recent debates at the UN Security Council about conflicts in Europe. We have heard from multiple statements that the role of the UN as an organization, and probably of the Security Council as well, could be enhanced in the framework of regulating and resolving conflicts in Europe. Do you think is that possible, and how?
First of all, I want to pay tribute to the presidency for the month of February that Ukraine has run. I think your country should be very proud of the team here. The fact the foreign minister came here and chaired the Security Council himself, it has really put Ukraine in a very strong position in the United Nations. Ukraine has very strong backing, not just from the United Kingdom, but from many other countries on the Security Council as well. And the fact that there has been such a focus on conflicts in Europe has been very helpful for the cause of Ukraine, to shine a spotlight on the terrible suffering that people in the east of your country are undergoing. The fact that Russia has a veto, and the fact that Russia is prepared to defend its positions through its role in the Security Council, is very troubling. It is a threat not just to your country, but to the whole of the international order. The multilateral system depends on countries upholding the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, bilateral agreements, and Russia is in breach of all of those things. So we need to stand firm, we need to be clear about the principles, and we need to increase the price that Russia has to pay for its violations of that international order.
But how do you think it could have been done, or could be done? We have heard from Minister Klimkin that there's a possibility, there's an option potentially of opening up, for example, as a first step, a UN's office in Donbass. Do you think it's possible?
Well, this has been much talked about in the past. Yes, it is possible, absolutely. It is best to do this in discussion with the United Nations, and I'm sure that he is in contact with the UN Secretary General and others about that. And I think that the UN has a role to play in tackling all of these crises, alongside other organizations like the OSCE, the European Union, NATO, and others.
I would like to ask about Crimea's annexation. We have heard from the UK and from yourself as well that Russia should give back Crimea, and in return we have heard some weird statements like about Falklands or Gibraltar. How do you deal with that? Do you think that Russia is living in some kind of different world with a different agenda, and how do you deal with a partner or with a member of Security Council who is living, probably, if you agree to that statement, in a different world with a different agenda?
Well, the United Kingdom stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and literally we sit side by side in the Security Council because it's alphabetical order. So we're right next to Ukraine, and we sit and we stand shoulder to shoulder, and that will continue all the way through the time of your country on the Security Council. And part of that commitment is to stand by the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine. And Russia's annexation of Crimea is illegal. Russia's occupation of eastern Ukraine is illegal. And sanctions will remain on Russia until Russia is out of eastern Ukraine and Russia is out of Crimea. Russia is very good at defending its position, and normally the thing that they do is to invent some false parallel or create some false facts, or they're very good at that. That's what they do, and we need to respond to that, and we need to respond clearly and calmly and focus not on the individual person making the argument, but on the underlying message and on the underlying principles. This is a legal question, this is a moral question, and we should stand firm on those principles, and that is exactly what we do at the United Nations.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it happened so, for some reason, that Crimea is off the table of any negotiations? I mean, Minsk is not about Crimea. Is there any platform in the world where this question could be negotiated where Ukraine could stand along with its allies under the Budapest Memorandum, which UK is as well?
Yeah, well, the UK is very proud to have been part of that, and we will keep in close touch with our Ukrainian colleagues about that question. But the answer to the question should come from them, not from us. We will be very much on their side in answering that question, but we do not have our own particular route which we recommend they take. For now, we recommend sticking with the Minsk agreements, implementing those. We support France and Germany and their crucial diplomacy in that regard, and we call on all of the parties to implement the Minsk agreement, including, of course, most obviously Russia, given the violations. But also the Ukrainian government needs to do its part, and we support them in doing that.
I would like to hear your ideas whether Ukraine is proactive enough on raising that question of Crimea. Do you feel that Ukraine is doing all it can to put that question back on the agenda?
I think that Ukraine is doing a good job here in New York on that question. I think that Crimea comes up very regularly. I'm not the only person that calls for the return of Crimea to its rightful place in Ukraine. Others do that as well. And so I feel as though here in New York there is a very strong body of opinion on Ukraine's side of this argument. It was striking before I arrived here, there was a very healthy majority in the General Assembly, 100 countries plus, who were on Ukraine's side of the argument on Crimea. And I don't know whether that's true in other fora around the world. And I agree with you that there isn't any actual negotiation going on at the moment between the parties about the return of Crimea to Ukraine, but that will need to come.
About Minsk agreement, how would you comment on Russia's recent decision to acknowledge passports of the self-proclaimed republics DNR and LNR? How does it play in the framework of this whole peace process, whatever effective and however effective it is?
We regret that decision. We condemn that decision. It is yet another violation of Russia's commitments. It is not up to Russia to decide which documents can be used. This is a Ukrainian sovereign issue, and it's up to the authorities of Ukraine to make decisions.
Do you have any ideas why has it happened? Why? Any ideas of Russia's motivation? I know it's not up to you, it's up to Russia, and the question should be addressed to Russia in the first place. But in the framework of all that is happening here in the United States as well, with the new Trump's administration, why?
Well, our analysis is that, Russia is seeking to create diversions away from what they and the Russian-backed separatists are doing in eastern Ukraine. This is a good example of that. They clearly must be under some pressure, knowing that what they hoped would be a new U.S. administration supporting them turns out not to be the case. The U.S. administration has been very clear and very similar to the UK position. That Russia must respect all of its obligations. Russia must get out of eastern Ukraine. Russia must abide by the Minsk agreement. The Russian-backed separatists must withdraw. The ceasefire must be implemented in full. The heavy weaponry must be withdrawn, and sanctions must remain. Those are all the positions of the new U.S. administration. So Russia must be very disappointed with that.
Mm-hmm. Seeing how ineffective Minsk has been for the past almost 2 years. Do you think there might be or could be an alternative to that agreement? And if so, what the alternative could be?
It's not my place to make that sort of judgment. I think that the parties should get on and implement the Minsk agreement. As I said, we support France and Germany in their diplomacy that led to that. It's very intense work that they did with our support and with the support of many others in the international community. So I encourage everyone to stick with that agreement. Of course, everyone will think that there is some better agreement available, but I think that given that we have that agreement, let's focus on implementing that and abiding by all of those commitments and insisting that every other party does the same.